Eduard Albert Meier's 23 pages. So, I shall begin with this. The story about Enoch or Nocodemian, respectively, is well known within our group. Excerpts from it may also be found within the OM. However, nothing has been mentioned until now about other things that transpired with Enoch nearly 12 billion years ago, in regards to his people. Even as far back as Sfath, your people requested that I remain silent until the year of 1995. Later on, this commitment of silence was reconfirmed too by Asket, then Semyasi, Quetzal and yourself, Pitah. Now the year of 1995 has begun, and you have given me your permission to talk about it, and I want to offer my knowledge as I still recollect it. After the great restitution movements by the peace fighter troops, following the end of the peace wars and peace times between all people and planets, Enoch's original tribe split into two lineages. One lineage went its own way to the Lyrian territories, where they settled in another space-time configuration that deviates by a fraction of a second from this, our space-time configuration. However, they lived there only after they had inhabited other worlds and systems in other galactic regions for many billions of years, which resulted in wars. Subsequently, tribal emigrations occurred throughout space, and ultimately culminated in another space-time configuration, which deviates from ours by a fraction of a second. The territory was located in the Lyra star system. For this reason, people continued to speak even to this day of the Lyrian territories and the old Lyrians, who later on had to return to our space-time configuration, partly for exploration purposes, and partly as a method of escape. Consequently, they arrived on Earth and became active in the well-known things I have already mentioned. Up to this point, this lineage retained all knowledge of their earliest origins, and from these earliest origins evolved the Plejaren. In their own language, they call themselves by the identical name as their star cluster beyond the Pleiades, which is located in another space-time configuration, and therefore, deviates from our space-time configuration by a fraction of a second. After breaking away from Enoch's ancient tribes approximately 12 billion years ago, the second lineage ventured on a totally different route than that of the Lyrian group, if they may be called this. They too emigrated into other galaxies, however, about 7 billion years ago, knowledge of their truer ancestry or means most ancient origin. Primeval was lost. Today they have absolutely no knowledge of their true heritage. Therefore, their chroniclers, historians and others created a different legend about their heritage, which had nothing or very little in common with their true background any longer. This lineage also consisted of many diverse races, in the same manner as the Lyrian lineage. However, in contrast to the Lyrians, who remained ready to fight at any time and steadily evolved toward an equilibrium, from which emerged the peace-loving, well-balanced, highly developed Plejaren, the second lineage reached this state far too quickly. Consequently, they completely lost their capability to fight, and were increasingly defenseless against aggressors. As a result, they joined an extensive emigration of many lineages, and landed in the region of the Sirius constellation. Once again they lost all knowledge of their past and heritage, therefore, a newer history of their ancestry was assembled and registered into the annals. This lineage spread through the Sirius region's farthest reaches, and continuously evolved to the point where they were capable of creating new life. Having lost the ability to fight, these people bred new lineages and manipulated their own people's genes, so these new races would be able to fight and protect them from repeated attacks by aggressors. Through invasive genetic manipulations, these new lineages of people were given barbaric traits that tended toward degeneration and cruelty, and their lifespan was limited to approximately 100 years, instead of the approximately 1,000-year lifespan of the creator overlords. Their genes were manipulated and tampered with because the creators and overlords feared the people would band together and annihilate them. Eventually, their fears became reality, and for this reason, new methods had to be found to bring the genetically manipulated people under their control once again. However, it meant these goals would be achieved through radical extermination. Since the creator overlords had far superior technology than the genetically manipulated people, they found only one recourse, and that was to flee, which they did with help from benevolent supporters from the Sirius regions. At the same time, these supporters secretly decided to exploit the genetically manipulated people for their own use. Two large groups of genetically manipulated people fled from the Sirius regions, and settled in an area on the other side of the central sun. This means they landed within and inhabited a very distant part of a remote star system, indeed, on planets beyond the galaxy's central sun, the central sun of the Milky Way. Eventually, however, They were discovered by space travelers from the old Lyrian lineage, whereupon they emigrated into the Lyra regions. Ultimately, within more recent Earth history, they came to the planet Earth, where they settled in China, Japan and other locations, and various new so-called lineages formed. Upon leaving the Sirius regions, the other genetically manipulated people found a way to the Sol star system, where several thousand rebellious genetically manipulated people had previously been banished to a myriad of locations on Earth as a punishment. These masses of diverse lineages found refuge on the planets Mars and Molona, respectively, where they constructed cities, pyramids, stations and other things. They led a good life on Mars, until the planet became uninhabitable through natural causes. For this reason, the genetically manipulated people had to leave that planet in ancient times, and subsequently, they settled on Earth. Over the course of time, they became known as the people on Earth, whose actual origin was within the regions and planets of Sirius. Only the pyramids and gigantic monuments on Mars were left behind abandoned. However, stations remained operative for a long time, even when all life on the planet had perished. One day all of this will be discovered by the people on Earth. The genetically manipulated people, and some of these sites will even be used once again. Malone, or rather Molona, was destroyed in fratricidal wars by its genetically manipulated inhabitants, who had originally come from the Sirius regions. They blew up the planet by diverting parts of an ocean into a subterranean or underwater magma chambers of a gigantic volcano. The Sol system's asteroid belt is made up of fragments of this former planet, whose orbit was not where the asteroid belt is today, but was located where Mars orbits the Sun today, and Mars at one time was located where the asteroid belt is today. This position reversal was caused by immense upheavals, in which the destroyer planet played an important role. The planetary locations of Mars, Earth and Molona, and star systems on the other side of our galaxy within the Milky Way, where two yellow races settle down, were selected as effective hideouts by these lineages' benefactors, who were the conspirators for the escape of the genetically manipulated people. Throughout the past, the refugees' hideout locations have been kept secret from the creator overlords, in fear that once the overlords determined the refugees' location, they would send out punitive expeditions, in order to eliminate the genetically manipulated people. This danger remains in existence even today, and consequently, the people of America were extremely careless in sending into space probes revealing data on the Earth's location, as well as detailed descriptions of the people on Earth. If by chance this information falls into the hands of the creator overlords, they would learn that the genetically manipulated people, the people on Earth, somehow had survived, and have greatly multiplied over these past millions of years. One would then have to presume that attacks upon the Earth and its inhabitants would be launched from the Sirius regions. Such actions would result in the total elimination of the people on Earth. The benefactors would not rush to aid the people on Earth, for they have withdrawn from our region long ago, shortly after their ventures to Earth. In fact, when they began fearing the genetically manipulated people, the people on Earth, in much the same way the creator overlords did formerly. This fear, which also gripped the benefactors, led to the eradication of the ancestral records of the people on Earth, by way of various manipulations. At that time, the benefactors elevated themselves as gods, and exalted themselves above the people on Earth, who rapidly became their vassals and believers. Truthfully, in doing so, the benefactors very soon became the antithesis of benefactors. On one hand, they hoped to make the genetically manipulated people their subjects, and on the other hand, many cults, religions, fratricide, family feuds and wars would be launched through this worship of gods, whereby, the people on Earth, the genetically manipulated people, would decimate and exterminate themselves. As a consequence, they, the gods, respectively former benefactors, hoped they would be free from the danger of the aggressive and barbaric people on Earth. However, this plan went completely awry, because the people on Earth, who had become increasingly stronger, smarter, more barbaric and underhanded, began to enjoy their role, and defended it to the last drop of blood, with every conceivable means, ancient and modern. Consequently, the genetically manipulated people, now the inhabitants of Earth, totally slipped from the control of their former benefactors, respectively, the gods, who in turn withdrew from the Earth, however, not before getting revenge, and demanding satisfaction in the future from the ever-growing population of people on Earth. The benefactors' withdrawal paved the way for the old Lyrians to help the people on Earth, and as they ventured to Earth on expeditions, and in flight after leaving their space and time configuration, they entered our space-time configuration in the Sol system. However, After a while they too portrayed themselves as gods, and began causing havoc. The former benefactors of the genetically manipulated people had no idea then, nor do they now, that these developments took place, nor do they know about the existence of the Plejaren. However, the genetically manipulated people on Earth disobeyed the Lyrians and Plejaren gods as well, although some of these gods attempted to force the people on Earth, such as the Giza intelligences, Ashtar-Shuran and the like, under their yoke and domination, using every conceivable means possible. The former benefactors divided into two groups also. One group included those men and women, who had sworn vengeance against the people on Earth, and later changed their minds, while the other group remained benevolent towards the people on Earth, and hoped to one day return to Earth. These gods alone from either group, know what the future holds in store for us. Should they really return one day, the people on Earth cannot expect that anything good will come from those who changed from being benefactors to malevolent, for despite their change into maliciousness, they were unable to return to their habitat, within the Sirius regions. Due to their treason, they were shunned as outcasts, and now they too must take great care not to divulge their whereabouts to the former creator overlords, or they may also become victims of their overlord's curse for revenge. Despite their departure from Earth and the Sol system, these former benefactors, who had become addicted to their passion for revenge, nevertheless continued to maintain some contacts with the people on Earth, and occasionally they even visit here. During their contacts and visits, they maliciously influence the people on Earth with erroneous messages, visions and similar things, in much the same way the dark elements among the old Lyrians had done previously. These are only occasional intrigues, however, which only occur, as a rule, in cult-like religious sectarian form, and are of very little significance, for they usually only affect the Christian religions, and not all religions. Since their alienation, the two groups, consisting of the former and the current benefactors, have had no contact whatsoever with each other. Indeed, it is very likely that such mutual contacts are strictly forbidden, and knowledge of the other group's existence has been erased from memory, as Quetzal once assured me during a private Plejaren clarification. Some rather astonishing things are revealed, when the genetic manipulations performed by the Sirius region creator overlords on specific people, which generated masses of aggressive fighters, is scrutinized. By way of their evolution, the creator overlords themselves had lost all their capabilities to fight. Their evolution was directed only toward opulence, knowledge, competence and so forth, while their own strength and capability to fight were completely eradicated. Not only did they lose the stamina to fight, but the capacity as well. When aggressors approached and threatened to annihilate these highly developed people, they had to find a solution to defend themselves against the attackers. To achieve this goal, they begot sons and daughters, into whom they implanted, through genetic manipulation, various forms of fighting capabilities, along with an aging process factor, as a precaution, whereby, the genetically altered people, would soon become very old and die prematurely. Such actions prevented the genetically manipulated men and women from banding together, and rising up against the creator overlords. This precaution soon proved to hold true, for the genetically altered people continuously increased in numbers, and they inherited their manipulated genes for all times. Due to the ever-increasing numbers of these genetically altered men and women, and their escalating aggressiveness toward the creator overlords, these fighters became a growing threat. For this reason, alternate ways of eliminating them were required by the overlords. However, prior to the selection of the most appropriate methods, most of the genetically altered people were able to flee, and with the help of the benefactors, they found a secure place, as I have already explained. The genetically manipulated people have since established themselves on Earth, to the degree where they simultaneously became this planet's rulers and its destroyers, because most of them remain overly entangled in the effects of the manipulated genes of fighting, viciousness, barbarism, bloodthirstiness, greediness, addiction, emotionalism and inhumanities, to name but a few. These characteristics have been a legacy for the genetically manipulated people since early times, and they also may actually be called the original sin. Information regarding the original sin was erroneously handed down by Christian religions, as the fable of Adam, Eve and the devilish snake in the Garden of Eden. However, this original sin, the genetic manipulation, repeatedly let the obsession for fighting to surface since time immemorial. However, this entire matter is in fact based upon the manipulation of a single DNA gene, which will be rectified, if only our geneticists were to finally discover it. This genetic manipulation, a characteristic of every man, woman, boy and girl living on Earth, by way of its inevitable hereditary transmission, will be reversed, and by doing so, we will finally rid ourselves of the degenerated demeanor, which has been imposed upon us by way of genetic manipulation. Although science has not yet sufficiently advanced in this field, scientists are nonetheless on the correct path. For this reason alone, there is ample reason today for continued progress in genetic research and genetic manipulation, despite objections by those who lack understanding, and others who vehemently reject these concepts, preaching idiotic religious nonsense, against things they may neither prevent nor impede. The people on Earth merely need to reverse the former specific genetic manipulation, which compels them to resort to bloodshed, murder, bloodthirstiness, hatred, greed, addiction, and many other terrible things. However, genetic manipulation of the fighting capabilities in the natural law and directive sense, must not be reversed, since the capability to fight is essential for continued existence and evolution. Consequently, the same event that previously occurred with the creator overlords will be prevented, who had robbed themselves of this fighting capability, and lost all their strength to fight through the manipulation of their own genes. For this reason, they were no longer able to defend themselves against any aggressors who attacked them, and this in turn, resulted in the monstrous concept of manipulating their own people, so they would become fighting machines through genetic alterations, which ultimately precipitated new sets of problems. When the people who were genetically altered into fighting slaves by the creator overlords are studied, evidence shows that they were procreated, or rather, were bred specifically for this purpose, as they were, indeed, perfectly normal people, and are actually highly evolved. However, they were fundamentally altered physically, through the manipulation of their genes. As a result, prior physical traits reappeared, and made these people, among other things, extremely resistant to environmental influences, and they displayed a certain barbarity. However, throughout all of these genetic alterations, the proponents neglected to manipulate the genetic factors responsible for cognizance, memory, comprehension, and compliance with the laws of creation. Everything that is balanced and logical. This omission was completely intentional, for research had shown that this particular omission would provide a form of security against the genetically manipulated people's complete degeneration. The omission would always allow a degree of kindness to surface and influence their lives, actions and other factors, and therefore, provide some guarantee for the creator overlords, that the genetically manipulated people would not become viciously aggressive against them. However, these specific desires were not fulfilled, except for the fact that the genetically altered people did not become totally barbaric, or completely degenerated. Therefore, since earliest times, the prevailing factors of comprehension and logic always penetrated the genetically altered people's thoughts and actions. Because of this factor, over the past millions of years, viciousness has increasingly lost its significance. However, it still remains quite evident, particularly within certain rulers, criminals, despots and many others. Unfortunately, the overlords were not aware that through the genetic manipulation, and the naturally existing factors of comprehension and logic, within the people on Earth, a conflict, or at least a feeling of being torn between opposing emotions, would often arise. This holds true even today with many people on Earth. As a result of these genetic manipulations, and from earliest times, the people on Earth have fought these inner conflicts, where aggressive and violent thoughts and actions frequently dominate. Nonetheless, increasing numbers of people combat their way to logic, by conquering the damage done by the genetic manipulation and their aggressiveness. Unfortunately, frequent excesses still occur, which are based upon degeneration and illogical thinking, because the people on Earth are unable to find the appropriate paths, and therefore, often cling to insane ideals, which frequently originate from religious sectarian idiocy and confusion. Few other details are needed, in order to explain the number of diverse skin tones of the people on Earth. From our previous explanations, it should now be apparent that various lineages of people, and therefore, their skin colors, originated throughout the most diverse planetary systems of the Milky Way galaxy. However, the regions of Sirius played a specific role, at least with respect to the actual origin before the old Lyrians came to Earth, where they later merged with the people on Earth. Numerous distant descendants from those early times still inhabit the Earth today. One more explanatory remark regarding the original genetic manipulators. In reality, they were the benefactors of the genetically altered people, therefore, they were their creator overlords. When the time came to eventually exterminate, or merely exile the genetically altered people, the benefactors split into two sides. Subsequently, the two divisions fought each other with harsh verbal assaults and accusations, until other advanced people from the Sirius regions intervened, who wanted to kill the genetically altered people. However, the true benefactors, those opposed to the eradication, were able to rescue a great many genetically manipulated people, whom they had divided into several groups, in spite of the many countermeasures made by those who wanted to eradicate. As was previously explained, two groups of people settled on the other side of the Milky Way galaxy, while the remainder of the people found new homes in the Sol system on the planets Mars and Malona. Subsequently, several thousand degenerated genetically altered men and women were deported to Earth. The benefactors knew even then that the people shipped there could not remain in the Sol system forever, but that sometime later they would have to depart for other destinations. The benefactors were fully aware that this remote system's sun was a waning star even then, and it was specifically selected for this reason, since the people from the Sirius region and the creator overlords, who were willing to eradicate the refugees, did not suspect this region with its dying star would be a candidate for new settlements of the degenerates and God's workers, as they were called by the creator overlords. For this reason, the benefactors placed vast distances between the genetically manipulated people's home planets within the Sirius regions and the Sol system, as well as the distant system beyond the Milky Way galaxy, so as to protect those living on them from those who threatened to eliminate them. Therefore, the selected hideaways were chosen due to their extreme remoteness, and their position at the fringe of the Milky Way galaxy. In addition to having a dying star, another determining facet also was that living conditions on the planets within the Sol system, on the other side of the galaxy, were very inhospitable, since the breathable air on each of the newly settled planets did not match the original air composition on the home planets. Even on Earth today this is applicable, for its air composition fails to measure up to respiratory requirements. The dying star, inadequate living conditions, and poor air in the Sol system, were reason enough for seeking hideouts here from the pursuers. The genetically altered people have struggled to survive ever since their arrival in the Sol system, so remote from Sirius, its planets and lineages of people. The newcomers propagated offspring, and ceaselessly evolved as the people on Earth. Soon they will have developed the capability to embark into this universe's vastness, and to their earlier points of origin. These actions contradict the claims of Earth scientists, who contend the people on Earth, in their current form, is the product of Earth, let alone Charles Darwin's primitive premise, that the Earth people descended from apes. There do exist some people originating purely on Earth, however, they display their own evolutionary lineage, which is independent from the apes. Yet, even they are saddled with the genetic legacy of the so-called original sin, if one may call it that. The same also applies to those many people propagated in former times by old Lyrians and Plowyaran, who then died on the Earth. Every single man, woman, boy and girl of other star systems, absolutely each and every one who has ever lived and died on the Earth, has not again returned to their home world. Their spirit forms passed into the Earth's realms of electromagnetic rays, and they have since reincarnated into new physical bodies on Earth. Because these people reincarnated on Earth, they too sustained the damage of the previous genetic alterations done by the creator overlords from Sirius. This entire situation has transpired because the genetically manipulated, the people on Earth, have energetically propagated offspring with each other, and as a result, the degenerate legacy unrelentingly spread throughout the planet Earth's entire population of people. The genetic manipulations do not imply that the people on Earth are born killing machines, but signify only that we are combative people, capable of killing when required to do so, or when events trigger the loss of control, outbursts, etc. Such actions may also lead to degeneration, however, generally they only occur when the two factors of consciousness and psyche, and therefore, someone's world of thoughts and feelings, are afflicted or briefly overburdened, whereupon they are prompted to act in the heat of passion. Therefore, the degenerated nature brought about, or rather fostered by the genetic manipulation, is not an intrinsic compulsive inborn lust to murder. In truth, the genetic manipulation was only created as a controllable factor, enabling them to subdue the degenerated nature implanted within them, and to make it slowly vanish, as they walk along their natural evolutionary path. However, this takes an incredibly long time, and therefore, the reversal of the gene manipulation is an absolutely suitable solution. Truly, there does not exist born murderers, and this fact must be stated explicitly. Such malevolent predispositions, degenerations or actions result from either injuries of a psychic conceptual emotional nature, through some sort of disorder of the consciousness, or by explosive rages. In the case of disorder of the psyche or consciousness, organic injuries of the brain may play an important part. All of this is the result only of the degeneration of the gene which was accordingly manipulated, and the purely negative forcing itself into the foreground. For this reason, additional items also come into play, such as savagery and blood frenzy during revolutions and wars, and at times when they discover the ease of killing, by overcoming the killing barrier. Such a barrier will normally remain present, despite the genetic manipulation, unless circumvented by disease or explosive rage. Therefore, it is not so that the people on Earth are born degenerated, in the sense that they are totally degenerated from birth onward, as those who only see the negativity often claim. The people on Earth are born with both the negative and positive from the very beginning of their existence, and therefore, not to the point that they are only negative or only positive. Ultimately, an equilibrium is established that truly provides the people on Earth with the capability and stability of conquering every inflicting injury, and all forms of external influences. Both negative and positive factors, when combined with and applied to the appropriate form, results in a grand total, which will turn the people on Earth into an extremely hardy living creature, which will have the required abilities. The creator overlords, who originally were people with the same characteristics as the people on Earth, insanely eliminated this gene from within themselves. In the process, they lost all combativeness and robustness. They modified their entire thinking process and actions accordingly, and this resulted in their complete decadence. Consequently, they were defenseless, and became subjugated when aggressors attacked them. As a result, they secretly developed this breed of fighters, whom they genetically manipulated, and covertly new lineages were propagated, having an array of diverse skin colors. These fighters served as pawns against the aggressors, and were victorious. Therefore, the creator overlords are to blame for their own deterioration. In their distress, they procreated a new lineage of people, who actually possessed all the naturally given prerequisites once again, and therefore, they were capable of fighting and living. However, this proved to be insufficient for the creator overlords, and they decided to conduct additional genetic manipulations, in order to make the new lineage of people even more aggressive than their natural tendencies provided. To some extent, the creators merely amplified certain factors through genetic manipulation, whereby the manipulated men and women actually turned into fighting machines. However, they were always equipped with the potential capability of normalizing themselves again, through the control of evolution. However, for such an event to transpire, millions of years is required, and this evolutionary path continues even today, as is evident within the people on Earth. The genetic manipulations made the negative factors, as the people on Earth are well aware, particularly forceful and unnaturally aggressive. For this reason, these factors have not dissipated from the people on Earth, to the point where they may flare up again at any time. Such behavior has led to extreme overpopulation, as well as every type of ensuing ill, religious sectarian insanity and imbecility that is frequently fanatical in character. All of these factors threaten not only the complete destruction of the planet Earth, but also the environment in general, as well as every life form. The people on Earth's thoughts and actions represent a regression phase towards the condition of the genetic manipulation, whereby everything degenerates and becomes excessive, just as it has in earlier times. The creator overlords, at that time, discerned another reason for eliminating the genetically manipulated people. This regressive phase is manifested ever more powerful in military action, military matters and religious sectarian machinations. Military practices, political hate campaigns, religious sectarian fanaticism, and every type of crime generate a loss of control over the positive, which is consumed by the negative. This turmoil spawns a state of negative frenzy, which is often then indulged in and pursued without restraint. In ancient times, men and women were equal, regarding their capability and energy to live, fight and do other things. Therefore, there was not a distinction between men and women in these aspects, nor in their work sites or types of tasks they performed. However, men often relieved the physically weaker women of strenuous chores. Men and women were equal in every way, without there being any discrimination whatsoever between them, as long as biological differences and related details, which were of course considered and observed even in times. Therefore, even then women were mainly responsible for maternal duties and household tasks when they were married with offspring. If this did not apply, women performed the identical tasks as men. Both men and women held government posts. Staff members were incorporated into the team to the extent that men and women always governed in equal numbers, and shouldered responsibilities together. Therefore, neither one man nor one woman controlled the government. The people themselves possessed the right to speak up, and join in the decision-making process for all concerns, resolutions, edicts and laws, etc. As previously explained, the two planets Mars and Malona in the Sol system were suitable for habitation by the refugees, the genetically manipulated people. Planet Earth was still quite inhospitable at that time, since its atmosphere was somewhat unhealthy for the people from the Sirius regions. Consequently, only fallible genetically manipulated men and women were deported to Earth, who had aggressively and viciously risen against their own people. 5 remnant lineages fled to Mars from the Sirius regions, while 2 other lineages embarked in the direction of the central sun of the Milky Way, in order to settle on the opposite side of the galaxy, as explained previously. The 5 lineages fleeing to Mars and Malona were joined by 2 other crater overlord lineages. These 2 other lineages had not been genetically manipulated in the same manner as the people on Earth, and therefore, did not carry the malicious changes within their DNA. Therefore, they were the benefactors who identified favorably with the genetically manipulated people, and they assisted them in their escape. Their origins are traced to 2 different overpopulated planets within the Sirius regions, where the inhabitants of that star system were strictly prohibited from procreating. As a result, every boy and girl born was murdered, and the offending people were sterilized and banished. The exodus of the genetically manipulated refugees from the Sirius regions took place over an extended period of many thousands of years, and they were constantly hounded by their pursuers, until they finally found an appropriate hideaway within the Sol system, far away from their pursuers' reach and sight. A similar fate awaited the other 2 refugee groups, who settled even further within the Milky Way galaxy. Indeed, all the refugee groups experienced harassment during their many years spent within the spaceships, as they traveled through the Milky Way galaxy. During their travels, revolutions and power struggles broke out, and as a result, the genetically manipulated people lost not only their previously accumulated knowledge, but also any evidence of their ancestral heritage. Appalling dramas befell them, and even led to cannibalism throughout the spaceships. As a result, the ancestral indications of the genetically manipulated people, the future people on Earth, was completely lost. This knowledge consisted of information regarding the laws of creation, among other things. Great confusion ensued, which led to further problems. In regards to the knowledge about the dangers of their pursuers, this knowledge was passed down from one generation to the next. The genetically manipulated people, along with their benefactors, the traitor crater overlords, who eventually settled on Mars and Malona, ultimately developed into a highly advanced technological culture. Unfortunately, they were not able to protect themselves sufficiently, and were eventually forced to flee from the planets. Their scientists discovered that the Sol system was cosmically much more perilous than they had originally anticipated. Many comets, roaming planets, meteors and other perils, repeatedly endangered the 2 newly inhabited planets Mars and Malona. Several of these space interceptors plunged upon the planets, causing immense damage and taking numerous lives. In the process, a large roaming planet was discovered, which had an unusually long rotation period, and an orbit that projected it far beyond the outermost planets of the Sol system. According to the astronomers' calculations, this large celestial body threatened to collide with the planet Mars, or to ravage it to the point where all planetary life, including all floral and fauna, would be completely destroyed in the wake of a near collision. The genetically manipulated people, or rather their distant descendants, made the decision to abandon their place of exile. Even these distant descendants were aware of their situation as one of exile, for they remained conscious of the danger of being pursued, albeit in a very vague form. As a result, they were incapable of defining the origin of the peril any longer. The threatening wandering planet in the past, over a long period of time, had caused a great deal of destruction, and wreaked great havoc in the Sol system. According to details formerly presented by Svath, the celestial body, called the Destroyer, has previously caused the most horrifying destruction on other inhabited planets in the past, before it streaked through on its chaotic course. The Destroyer eventually settled within the Sol system, where it also wreaked much havoc. Over time it has decreased its orbiting period to an average of 575.5 years, however, the Plejaren have since increased this interval again. As a result, the Destroyer will again appear in the Sol system in about 1180 years. The Plejaren were unable to completely knock the planet off course as they had planned. Nonetheless, they did change the Destroyer's orbiting period and rotation time in such a way that it no longer presents much danger, at least for the time being. Normally, the planet would have returned in the year of 2255, with devastatingly destructive results, the High Council refused to give the Plejaren permission to offset the wandering destroyer's course by any other means, or to even annihilate it, and the High Council has requested the Plejaren refrain from doing so, as the destroyer's obliteration, or a further change of its course, would generate an even greater destruction, and possibly even affected the Earth in other ways. As they completed the details for their emigration opportunities, a dispute again erupted among the distant descendants of the genetically altered people, who had of course inherited the genetic manipulations from their ancestors. A decisive factor in the erupting disputes proved largely to come from the new teachings presented by the benefactors. The teachings stated that the benefactors were the creators of the genetically manipulated men and women, or rather, their distant descendants, and that they, the creators, must be awarded absolute obedience and worship. Most benefactors claim to be the highest exalted beings, the creators and makers of the universe. However, these opinions and demands were not shared by all benefactors, and subsequently, two camps formed. One camp consisted of the purported creators, and the other, of those who retained their prevailing benevolent attitude, and who distanced themselves from this creationism. A dispute resulted, not only among these two camps, but also among the faithful within the two parties. Their followers. Ultimately, the antagonists reached an agreement, whereby, those who wanted to do so, departed from the planet Mars in the direction of Earth and Melona. Subsequently, many people from both camps grouped together to emigrate jointly, some of whom traveled to the planet Melona, and the others to Earth. The emigration group leader to Melona was called Zinteka, whose wife, Amalaka, concurred with him. The group heading for Earth also had two emigration leaders, who were brothers called Semos and Passus. The atmosphere on Melona was safe and healthy for the emigrants and the people already inhabiting it. It was somewhat like the air on Mars, and similar to the air the descendants of the genetically manipulated people had become accustomed to over many millennia in their spaceships. Unfortunately, the same could not be said about the air on Earth. Therefore, practical modifications were required for future emigrants who wanted to live on Earth. For this reason, the same adjustments ensued that had previously occurred when the degenerates were exiled to Earth. At that time, before they were deported to Earth, the exiled men and women were forced to adapt to the poor quality atmosphere, and their skeletal frame required further stabilization among other things. Those people willing to emigrate from Mars to Earth now had to undergo the same procedures, so they would be capable of establishing themselves on the planet Earth. Everything transpired as the scientists had formerly determined. The destroyer penetrated the Martian orbit and wrenched Mars with it into another Sol orbit, namely that of Melona, where it then remained. Subsequently, Melona drifted away because of the destroyer's powerful forces, however, managed to exist in a stable orbit, until the time when it was destroyed by its inhabitants many millennia later, and became the asteroid belt. During this drifting catastrophe, the inhabitants of Melona were decimated from approximately 470 million people, to barely 14 million, however, they were able to recover somewhat, and by the time they destroyed their planet, their population had increased again to approximately 52 million. The refugees on Earth lost all contact with the people on Melona and Mars, which became completely desolate, and its remaining inhabitants perished. The men and women from the benefactor group, who previously had demanded that they be exalted and worshipped, fiercely spread their illogical teachings, and never again allowed the well-disposed benefactors to gain any power. In this manner, the creator overlords were then capable of being worshipped as the creators of the people on Earth, rising to power and spreading their insane religious doctrines, which however, contained an absolutely fake and equally illogical history, regarding the origin of the people on Earth. Its purpose was to definitively destroy and erase all information of the true origin of the people on Earth, in the event that someone else would attempt to secretly glean the information from somewhere. Of course, the real benefactors did not allow this to occur. They fought back by inventing their own religious doctrines, and disseminating them among the now numerous people on Earth. They were hoping that through their new belief systems, the people on Earth would learn to search for the genuine truth, in order to grasp and comprehend the natural laws of creation, and they envisioned their situation turning to the better. To this end, the real benefactors coined the phrase, "The teachings will be produced for the people on Earth, so they may remove the degeneration within themselves." However, in these teachings, as in the teachings by the Creator overlords, there lay the secret hope that these various philosophies of faith and religious doctrines would form a monumental deterrent, whereby, the distant descendants of the genetically manipulated people would limit the size of their population, to tolerable and responsible numbers. An alternate motive behind this was that the genetically manipulated people's descendants would neither rise against the creator overlords, nor the still benevolent benefactors, in order to gain control over them among other things. The benefactors did not want the descendants to prematurely evolve to the point where the descendants had the capability to fly once more into space, with the help of a too rapidly expanding and too highly developed technology, and where they would find their previous home worlds, such as Mars and the planets in the Sirius region. The creator overlords also hoped that in their scheme of things, and through their various religious doctrines, the people on Earth would eradicate themselves through the ensuing confusion and wars. They based their hope on the concept that the people on Earth would only be technologically, biologically and scientifically capable of conquering space, only when they had evolved through a sufficiently lengthy period, so as to achieve the mandatory adjustments within their thinking processes and actions. In other words, their intention was that the people on Earth, through religious doctrines and diverse religious forms, would have the insight to resolve their genetically manipulated genes, whereupon, they could correct this degeneration. An important factor in this scenario was that in the distant future, the people on Earth would discover for themselves the genetically induced damage imposed upon them, and find their path back to normality through appropriate genetic reversals. They believed and hoped that the distant descendants of the genetically manipulated people, the people on Earth, should only then seek contact with their original past, their ancestors, who live on other planets, and various other lineages of people within the vastness of the Milky Way galaxies, as well as foreign galaxies within this universe. Judging from all indications, the people on Earth evolved very quickly on their own, for increasing numbers of people have now been born over a very long period, who cherish every aspect of evolution. The benefactors' hopes will be fulfilled, and peaceful lineages of people will come to Earth from this universe's vastness, in order to maintain contacts with the people on Earth. However, this can only take place when the unfortunate chain of genetic manipulation is reversed and normalized in sequential order. Pre-programming has previously occurred, allowing the people on Earth to detect and locate the deplorable genetic manipulation of our DNA chain. However, these findings will not transpire for some time. Furthermore, with certainty, this error, which was imposed upon the people on Earth, will be reversed by them. This error has kept us from living the full life of normal people to this day, and has frequently distanced us from the laws of creation. For this reason until now, only a few people have had the capability to find the truth, arriving at this point only through the most painstaking struggles, in order to conquer the genetically manipulated degeneration on their natural course of evolution. Therefore, everything on Earth is directed toward the elimination of what was once damaged through genetic manipulation, so everyone on Earth may leave the Sol system once again before our star dies, and the entire Sol system ceases to support us. This event will occur far sooner than scientists on Earth currently think. Truthfully, it is already a dying star. And when the people on Earth emigrate once again from Earth, and begin to adjust themselves to new home planets distant and remote from the Sol system, they will have to adapt to those prevailing atmospheric conditions, just as their ancestors did in the past. The newly encountered conditions will be very similar to those of Earth times, when the genetically manipulated people were breathing healthy air. As can be stated today, these distant descendants of the people on Earth will have an extraordinary and agreeable future. However, many years will pass before the people on Earth find the evidence that their former ancestors came to the Sol system from distant star and planetary systems, in order to settle on Mars before emigrating to Earth. When they do, the first evidence may also be found that their earliest ancestors, the genetically manipulated people, or rather their distant descendants, were refugees and exiles who originated in the Sirius regions. This evidence will shake the scientific community, and even more so the religious world, and will prompt the need for great changes. This moment will come primarily when artifacts from a previous advanced civilization are found on Mars, including pyramids and sculptures, such as the so-called face on Mars, which represents but a mere fraction of the entire discovery. The findings and message to people on Earth, regarding the discoveries on Mars, will be the main factors in the collapse of the legendary picture our former ancestors had formed of our heritage. Many people will realize with absolute clarity that we did not originate from this planet, and furthermore, we are not the only people in this universe. However, one prophecy states that very advanced people of another star system will officially land on Earth June 5, 1995. A second prophecy predicts this event for 1998. However, one should probably not count on these occurrences taking place, for the people on Earth are currently incapable of tolerating such contacts, the ensuing knowledge from them, and the related ramifications. Should this event actually take place, the Plejaren would withdraw from Earth henceforth, and would keep their distance, as Quetzal previously has explained some time ago, along with Svath before him in the 1940s. However, one must remember that these prophecies are indeed only prophecies and not predictions. Therefore, everything may change, and the prophecies may not come true, unless essential conditions for the events exist. And this is exactly the case, always with the presumption that everything occurs precisely and correctly, for its prerequisite is that the people on Earth must first remedy the damage or corruption of their DNA, and change their mentality, thoughts and actions into the natural state, before attaining open contacts with people of other star systems. This means that a succession of years must still elapse before these prerequisites are fulfilled. Until this time, the people on Earth will experience all forms of events, changes and other things, which are not only essential for their evolution, but unavoidable as well, due to their thoughts and actions. On one hand, this entire scenario inevitably results in numerous situations, which are frequently a grave danger or impediment to the people on Earth's evolution. On the other hand, these events are helpful to the people on Earth's evolution, and therefore, are generally unavoidable. Taking everything into account, official contacts with people of other star systems is currently truly not desired, for the people on Earth are incapable of logically coping with reality, particularly those of the secular sectarian, military, religious sectarian, economical and political positions. For this reason, official contacts with people of other star systems would be entirely out of place, were they to occur at this time or in the near future. Contacts with people of other star systems at this time are viable only with specific men and women, or certain small groups. To this end, contacts of a secret military and governmental nature would be equally feasible as well. However, such events will increasingly lead to the public emergence of fraudulent contactees, and observers who present purported photographic material perfectly falsified with computers. The public will often believe them, and all the frauds, deceivers, charlatans, delusional ones, and those who are capable of mesmerizing many ignorant faithful followers in matters concerning God, Jesus Christ, Mary, Joseph, Moses, and other sundry saints and masters, for the people on Earth are too easily deceived, and very gullible in their search for truth. Consequently, contacts with people of other star systems may only occur on an official level if everything proceeds correctly, and the people on Earth become mature enough to accept the contacts. However, this still requires more time, during which many things will transpire, in regards to discoveries of evidence that the people on Earth did not originate on this planet, and also that we are not the only people in this universe, or in this galaxy, the Milky Way. When the events that are yet to transpire, before the time when the first official contacts with people of other star systems will take place are considered, a certain chronology of the prospective historic events must be established. To this end, prudence dictates that exact dates not be named, or it could result in conditions that negatively alter future events. Furthermore, the spiritual growth of many people could suffer, because they often attempt to change things once they learn of coming events, events that should not be altered in any manner, shape or form, for they are predictions, not revisable prophecies. Therefore, I will not mention any dates, however, I am familiar with them. For this reason, I will simply list in chronological order the most important upcoming events, or rather incidents and occurrences, etc., which will take place beginning with the year of 1995. This year will show that nature's catastrophes will continue to wreak endless havoc. Events related to the havoc will increase or decrease in number, in other words, occasionally there will be more of them, and sometimes less, however, overall the incidents will escalate. Regarding overpopulation, unfortunately, no changes for the better will take place, indeed, overpopulation will drastically increase. Additionally, lengthy deliberations will increasingly take place regarding Islamic fundamentalism, which will mesmerize the people on Earth. Uprisings, revolutions, wars and other diverse forms of unrest will escalate tremendously, with Islamic fundamentalism playing a very sad part in the scenario. The health of the people on Earth is in extreme danger, not only from the rapid spread of AIDS, but from the rising ill effects of animal diseases among the people on Earth, whereby, the Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome is not the only repercussion. The scurvy epidemic will increase among animals as well. And if this is not enough, another horrible epidemic of pneumonia will break out among the people on Earth. Even though efforts will be made to the contrary, the renewed threat of chemical warfare, a long-standing practice, will be on the rise once again. Likewise, the same holds true for nuclear and biologic weaponry. The danger of accidents from nuclear power plants will increase throughout the planet Earth. Regarding this subject, France in particular must be extraordinarily careful in every way, for one prophecy warns of a strong probability of an accident near Lyon, which may be prevented, as long as the responsible men and women undertake the right steps. Initial efforts are being made by a new movement to promote total non-violence, while a woman gains a high and influential position among world powers through another group's formation. While mass tourism will increase by leaps and bounds, and will slowly but surely invade and destroy the remaining paradises on Earth, the first public steps will be taken for a flight to Mars, but will not obtain success. However, the next flight, which will occur very soon after the first, will have better success, although it will encounter certain difficulties, due to unexpected technical problems. All of this will transpire shortly after a worldwide misery of unemployment. A new hoarding of weapon stockpiles will follow, at a time when the worldwide production of weaponry is accelerated once again. This will signal the first threat of a looming Third World War as foretold by a prophecy, unless we strive to avert this danger through logical reasoning, and appropriate thoughts and actions. Should the people on Earth fail to act against the fulfillment of this prophecy, a new and extremely destructive weapon will be built, which will produce disastrous consequences. One important factor in the scenario is the criminal neglect to monitor the Earth from space. New weapons will once again create quite a stir, as will the death of 4 heads of state, who will die within 7 days of each other. These will be the last danger signs, which foretell that within merely 2 years of these events, the long-feared Third World War will indeed erupt, unless the people on Earth finally gain mastery over their reasoning and stop these coming events. Should this not be done, the people on Earth will fail in their attempt to protest and boycott the new deadly weapons, because by this time, the armories of many nations will be full to their capacity. Passing laws to prohibit the use of these weapons will be largely ineffective at this late stage. The Third World War cannot be averted if the people on Earth fail to become reasonable. The war will begin with conventional weaponry, and will escalate to nuclear, chemical and biological warfare. The Third World War will begin in November of a specific year, after 5 years of intensive efforts are spent reaching this goal, which will be preceded by 4 years of unspecified preparations. If the Third World War actually occurs, it will last for 3 years and 11 months, and therefore, will end in October of the 4th year. By this time, the Earth's northern hemisphere will be largely destroyed by nuclear fires and radioactive radiation, which will kill most of the animals and plants, unless the people on Earth see to it that the prophecy proves itself to be just a prophecy without fulfilling itself. Should this not be the case, the world will face some additional 11 bitter years of poverty, misery, starvation and many other horrific things. The nuclear radiation will cause the crippling and mutation of boys and girls born at that time, and many who survive the war will be contaminated and burned by lethal radiation. Chemical warfare will cause horrifying and atrocious skin diseases, and biological warfare will produce festering sores and many other things, not to mention vicious mutated people, etc. However, prior to these events unfolding, scientists will discover the manipulated gene from ancient times, within the DNA chain responsible for the rapid aging of the people on Earth. These events may yet unfold this year, for preparations in this area have already begun in the year of 1994. However, whether scientists make their discovery public, and utilize their findings to their fullest potential is quite questionable. From the way things look now, public disclosures regarding these discoveries will not be made until a much later time, and probably will still remain this way for a very long time to come, before the public will be fully informed about the discovery. Therefore, a long period will pass before the genetic manipulations are reversed by retromanipulation of the pertinent gene. For the time being, the scientists on Earth will be unaware that the gene they have stumbled upon is the key factor, and that it is this particular gene which has been previously manipulated once before many millions of years ago. If the prophecy of a Third World War fulfills itself, and the people on Earth do not immediately begin rethinking and redirecting their entire efforts into beneficial routes, the consequences of a Third World War will be cataclysmic. Likewise, this holds true for an enormous revenge campaign directed against those responsible for causing this horrific event, which will be initiated and directed by a bloodthirsty man, who is, how could it be otherwise, a representative of God, the Pope of the Catholic religion. Once again, These events are based on the condition that the prophecy fulfills itself, regarding the Third World War, through the fault of the people on Earth. With the melting of the polar caps, there also looms for the planet Earth in the not-too-distant future another severe economic crisis, which will spread throughout the planet. And another global war, the Fourth World War, which will once again threaten the already decimated population on Earth, because of the insanity of the people. However, several reasonable men and women will be able to neutralize the threat, which will be again assisted by the invention of new weapons with great striking power, which will be the materialization of those weapons existing now only in science fiction. They are death rays, ray cannons, ray rifles and ray guns, among others. In the midst of these developments, 3 scientists will generate an incredibly inexpensive energy source. However, this will not be the only new form of energy, for another will be found as well, which is based on sound vibrations. And again, new and deadly weapons will be developed from this. Scientists tend to utilize everything they can get their hands on as a weapon for mass destruction, and for this reason, it is inevitable that the people on Earth will stop the greenhouse effect, and utilize its effects in reverse, thereby preventing a further melting of the polar caps. During this period, the people on Earth will increasingly dedicate themselves to space travel, which will have been neglected for many years. Venus will become particularly interesting for the people on Earth during this period, and for this reason, many will contemplate sending a manned space capsule to the volcanic planet. Simultaneously, the people on Earth will finally utilize an abundant energy source by utilizing the Earth's interior energies. They will develop 2 new dangerous weapons. The first weapon's high-pitched inaudible sounds will be able to destroy any material, and will have the capability of absolutely destroying all life forms. In other words, it will be an ultrasound weapon. The second weapon will have as its basis utilizing high-frequency energies, which too will be capable of destroying and killing everything. Discoveries and inventions in the field of gene technology or genetic manipulation, respectively, will continue, for certain events must unfold, contrary to the desires of those against genetic manipulation, who even now persist in ranting and raving against it. The time is no longer very far, when through genetic manipulations, plants and animals will be successfully crossbred, and completely new life forms are created. Therefore, the idiotic antagonistic gripers will scream in vain, and should actually be grateful that the science on Earth has advanced to the point where genetic manipulations are becoming feasible. For only through genetic manipulations will future rectification of the genetically manipulated degeneration be guaranteed, so the people on Earth may be able to again live with a normal progression of negative and positive, and also have a normal lifespan. However, the true origin of the people on Earth will not be revealed through this process, and may remain a mystery to the people on Earth for the time being, even though they will actively search for it while on space stations beyond Earth. However, this does not signify that science on Earth will be inactive. On the contrary, scientists on Earth will unveil the secrets of gravitation. And in doing so, they will begin mastering to certain facets of space and mass. However, just before this transpires, the people on Earth will develop the capability of allowing organs to regrow for organ transplants. These organs will always be adapted to the particular body in need of the organ. As a result, the danger of organ rejection will be eliminated. During this period, renewed advances into deep space will occur, whereby a large space project critical to the people on Earth will take shape, and Albert Einstein's theory on relativity will undergo several modifications. One religion will initiate large-scale war activities at that time, which results in the development and utilization of another new and dangerous weapon that will be capable of changing the climate. However, as bad as they may seem, these periods are not as unstable as that of 1995, a year when new discoveries on Mars are possible, and a year when the seeds of a new ideology are sown that sets it apart from traditional religions. 1995 will also be a year when a previously unknown and powerful man begins to come into prominence, whose spell binds the world and gathers followers around him. These events coincide with many innovations and discoveries in technology and science, for 1995 and the ensuing years bring incredible breakthroughs that will change civilization on Earth. One contributing factor to these breakthroughs in the near future will be the exposure and rectification of an error in a certain scientific calculation. Precipitated by the previously mentioned climate weapon, the entire Earth will be subjected to very problematic climatic changes when overall temperatures fall, that is, drop dramatically. The result will be that land masses and oceans will freeze, due to the people on Earth's insanity. Consequently, a new invention will be developed, which will be powered by the most economical of energies, and will be used to artificially heat the Earth's atmosphere. This will be the moment when Japan and China will discover that the prevailing physics are not the last word in knowledge, but that there exists yet a higher level of physics which extends into fine matter spheres. Upon this realization, science will be discredited for some time. Nonetheless, space exploration will continue, and the actual period when space travel commences, with its many related discoveries, will begin already in the very near future. Overall, expeditions into space will be successful, and the people on Earth will discover, or rather locate ancient traces and effects left behind by people on Mars. This will present sufficient reason for the people on Earth to build, furbish and fly new spaceships with even greater ranges into the vastness of space, to make ever greater, more interesting, and especially more significant discoveries. Initially, these spaceships will travel over relatively long periods of time, until propulsion systems are developed that make super-speed space travel without time shifts feasible. Spaceships reaching velocities above the speed of light, indeed, speed several million times the speed of light, will one day become the norm. However, until this occurs, several hundreds of years, even millennia will pass. Still, these aforementioned predictions will occur in the near and somewhat more distant future, and the people on Earth will not be kept waiting too much longer. Even elderly people alive today will experience the commencement of these predictions. The discovery, refurbishing and renewed operation of ancient artifacts and stations of people on Mars, in the not-too-distant future, and much later in other places as well, will be accomplished by our more distant descendants. However, these events are also associated with grave danger, for dangerous diseases and epidemics will be brought back to Earth by way of space travel, along with the exceedingly vicious wolf, as one prediction calls this horror, which could be a horrifying animal or a deadly epidemic. The definition of the wolf is not clear yet, and its explanation is still pending. According to the prediction, this deadly factor will be introduced or carried to Earth either by ordinary space travelers, or by law-breaking space travelers. Additionally, in the distant days ahead, the discovery of a new and very significant substance is foretold, one that will benefit the people on Earth greatly, as long as they are able to utilize it to their own benefit. This entire scenario transpires at a time when a new order exists on Earth, that satisfies in an inexpensive manner all needs of the people on Earth. New overall-like suits for the people on Earth will be invented and produced, that will enable them to fly through the air freely without aid from any other devices. However, barely 3 decades prior to this event, a third DNA information code will be discovered within the people on Earth, and the first concrete steps will be undertaken to eliminate diseases in the elderly, heart diseases and attrition. After approximately 25 years, these efforts will prove successful. Simultaneously, once the appropriate steps are taken, the feasibility of a classless society, as well as technologically biological prerequisites will emerge that deal with the worldwide cleanup of the polluted rivers, lakes and oceans. This progress will be negated, however, by an extremely negative invention, in form of a biological weapon. It will wreak tremendous havoc, and will induce instant aging in people and animals in seconds. Shortly thereafter, the period of nocturnal dawning comes into existence, as stated in another prediction. This nocturnal dawning will be a new technological achievement, whereby the dark side of planet Earth is illuminated by an artificial sun affixed to a space station. This device will not create full daylight, but a bright dawn-like condition. The artificial sun in the sky will virtually ring in a new age, the age of space conquest on a grand scale. From here on, space travel will definitively become commercial, and will turn into a significant powerful institution, by which the people on Earth through science will pursue the enigma of creation, and with it, the origin of life and all existence. Of course, these events will make science very respectable again, especially as they relate to the institution of space travel, which will control the scientists. Ultimately, this will not turn out well, and will transpire as it must. This space travel institution will increasingly ignore the governments and scientists on Earth, and will deal with them unfairly. They will also generate conflicts again, that may provide the most auspicious base for a new war. All of this will come into play barely 15 years after the aging gene is isolated and neutralized, and the biological aging process is largely surmounted, with the related previous vicious genetic manipulation finally remedied again. A looming new war will break out and last for approximately 40 years. During this period, or about 6 years prior, many people on Earth will be converted into machines, that is, cyborgs for the first time, by connecting their nervous system to microscopic electronic biologic gadgetry and machinery, that will serve to guide them. This will cause great problems about 85 years later, when the now powerful scientists begin to play God, as they had done in earliest times, and they will create new hybrids between people and animals through genetic alterations. These new hybrids will declare their solidarity with the cyborg men and women. However, before this transpires, another 80 years will pass after the creation of cyborg people, as I mentioned previously. With the creation of cyborg men and women, intelligent, biologic electronic machine-like robots will be constructed. A gigantic space station will be built, upon which a vast number of people will live, while the station travels in its own orbit within the Sol system. Because of the people on Earth's intrinsic attitude, induced by their degeneration, wars and revolts will occur on Mars. These events will transpire when some people on Earth, after conferring with people of another star system, construct residential buildings beneath the oceans, which will dangerously interfere with the ecologic equilibrium of the oceans, land masses and the air. Once again the time will arise when another new and deadly weapon is invented that will disintegrate the bones of life forms. Simultaneously, the artificial star created about 50 years prior will drift from its orbit, and over a mere 72-hour period will plunge to the Earth. The Earth's own rotation and orbit around the Sun will change, and will result in the reduction in the length of years, days and nights. Unfortunately, this will also be the time when the first space conflict, a space war, takes place between the people on Earth, and those men and women who will have migrated to Mars by then. The gigantic space station in orbit within the Sol system will be damaged. At this time, a new chronology for the people on Earth will be contemplated, because the altered lengths of the days and seasons on Earth cannot be utilized in the old system. The people on Earth, already under the spell of religions and religious sects at this time, will remain spellbound for several more centuries. Following the installation of the new chronology for the people on Earth, the founder of a new religion will come to the forefront, and will revoke the Christian Sunday, Islamic Friday and Jewish Sabbath, in order to establish a new holiday schedule. As an experiment, money will be briefly abolished, the clandestine trading with valuable goods such as precious metals, diamonds and other commodities will continue. Sometime later, the insane people on Earth will wretchedly alter the Earth's atmosphere in a dreadful format. And another war on Earth will ensue, for the people on Earth will have failed in their attempt to become more peace-loving and intelligent. The future will hold nothing positive pertaining to scientists, because they will have begun to perform their first genetic manipulations on people and animals by this time, and will be creating creatures, so-called hybrids, whom they will produce by crossing people with pigs, and train them as fighting machines. These creatures will be sent into war, and will also perform a variety of tasks in space. However, the situation will not go well very long. The creatures will oppose their creators, like it is also the case with cyborg people, who will have arms and legs amputated, so their nervous system can be attached to minute electronic biologic devices, whereby these hybrids become living navigational devices for spaceships, and every type of weaponry, machinery and vehicles for the people on Earth, to name but a few. A man will appear and present the universal teachings to the people on Earth. He will be remarkably successful, although existing religions and religious sects will follow up with global countermeasures, as has been the case since ancient times. The teachings of the spirit within each man and woman will be included in these teachings, and some 40 years later, the teachings of reincarnation will have been disseminated worldwide and accepted by the existing religions. However, prior to this event, some unpleasant encounters with people of another star system will take place, that may result in a gratifying union, depending upon which direction the people on Earth take. Taking the wrong direction will result in disagreeable, possibly even dangerous prospects. Through technological intervention, the people on Earth will slowly learn to prevent natural catastrophes. Volcanoes, in particular, will be placated and their activity controlled, as will be the influences of weather conditions. Triggered by the invention, or rather, discovery of a new and very valuable energy source and its rights to ownership, renewed war activities on Earth will ensue. Problems will also occur in regards to the overpopulation on Earth, because the increase in health and longevity will amount to lifespans from 350 to 450 years. This increase in average lifespan will precipitate increasingly greater problems of overpopulation, and all other subsequent obstacles, which will include migrations, and will result in new types and lineages of people. Among them will be a group who call themselves Eurasians. they will demand the Eurasian region for their homeland, at a time when the hybrids, those people-animal genetically manipulated creatures and the cyborg people, will be creating incredible problems. These difficulties will lead to the deplorable decline of every space travel program, and nearly bring space travel to a complete standstill. The problem will come about because of the cyborg peoples and hybrids' refusal to continue working for the people on Earth, and because of their unwillingness to continue a life of subservience and exploitation as living maneuvering devices for spaceships, vehicles, equipment, war machines and other gadgetry. These events will transpire at a time when a climatic reversal begins on Earth, because of the Sun's noticeably weakening activity, triggered by reduced nuclear fusions within it. The people on Earth's urge to explore knows no bounds, and consequently, they will penetrate ever deeper into space. Unfortunately, this tendency will also produce repercussions. Inevitably, unexpected disasters will occur, for the prediction states that in the not-too-distant future, the people on Earth will face some extremely terrifying phenomenon during their space expeditions, that will present great and trying obstacles. One event supposedly 20 years later will take place, as the frightening and definite conclusion is reached that the Sun is truly a dying star. And an additional 35 years later, the people on Earth will face a new horror, when one of their exploration spaceships bring a deadly epidemic back to Earth, which will leave medical scientists completely helpless. By this time, the people on Earth will have gained knowledge about the essence of creation for 35 years, likewise, the truth will be understood that negatives and positives represent within themselves equal independent units, although they also form a perfect unit when joined. The previously mentioned space exploration craft will lift off shortly after this, whereupon it will encounter the great horrors. Equipped with a completely new propulsion system, the expedition spacecraft is expected to penetrate space to the extent that it will reach the original home planets of the first genetically manipulated people. Such an undertaking will still be completely irresponsible on the part of the people on Earth from that period. On one hand, they will have remained trapped in their genetically manipulated degeneration, and on the other, in their megalomania they will vastly fail to underestimate the dangers of outer space and extremely advanced people of other star systems. They will become aware of their failings only midway along their path toward the home planets of the genetically manipulated people's origins, when the expedition will be confronted by terrifying people of another spaceship. Ultimately, this space expedition becomes feasible only when the technological apparatuses, machinery, all electronic instruments and many other items from that period, are no longer operated and piloted by people manually. The technological devices will become equipped instead with independent, biological intelligence, that makes all piloting and operations nearly infallible. The cyborg people still performing those functions at that time, will rebel against this change of events. Simultaneously, the people on Earth's space travel will reach the pinnacle of its development as research forges on, and soon further deductions and solutions will unlock additional secrets of matter. Concurrent with this development will begin the rule by the cyborg people, under the leadership of someone from their own ranks, who will be the enemy of all other people on Earth and cause a great stir, although he will die very soon after these events. During the same period, once again, the megalomaniac scientists will perform an incredible spectacle, by producing a gigantic second star. Although this group of scientists will be small in number, through a dangerous experiment they will ignite one of the gas giants of the Sol system, which will burn for 7 days and glisten as a second star, before it burns out and fades. Jupiter and Saturn could be equally suitable candidates for this experiment, as they are uncompleted miniature stars, making redundant the selection of planets for this future insanity. Great progress in brain research will occur during the same period, including the implantation of micromodules into people's and animals' scalps. The micromodules will aid the execution of the brain's navigational functions. At this time, far from Earth, an artificial world within another star system will be populated by an immense migration surge, that stems from the continued irrational increases in overpopulation. The cyborg people, simultaneously, will become a danger to the people on Earth through their own propagation, and the string of many descendants. Due to genetic alterations, these descendants will be born without arms and legs, with their nerve endings already exposed. This will permit easy access to the nerve endings of their extremities, which can then be attached without surgery to various devices and machinery, etc. The cyborg people will become a true menace to the people on Earth, for they will possess unforeseen consciousness-related powers. Over time, they will further develop these powers by way of an above-normal application of their consciousness, whereby the brain, through unique, painstakingly constructed energy generators, will be endowed with special energies from the outside. All of this will allow the forces of the consciousness to perform at record levels. The time will come when further powerful changes take place within the Sol system, as the Sun's nuclear fusions decrease. Indeed, the entire gravity field will not only become unmanageable and changed, but large-scale climatic changes will become the daily norm. These occurrences will inspire scientists to record performances, because they will wish to find methods to counteract the Sun's negative consequences. These consequences will manifest themselves far sooner than anticipated, and in fact contradict millennia-old erroneous scientific presumptions. Only then will the people on Earth correctly realize that the Sun is a dying celestial body, and that the end of the Sol system is predetermined already. Nonetheless, the Sun will continue to exist another billion years, but by then it will be a dead star, that will ultimately be swallowed up and destroyed by a black hole. Therefore, scientists will begin performing at feverish rates. In the process, they will discover that a certain scientific theory was miscalculated. By eliminating this error, and correcting future computations, scientists and their amazing highly developed technology, will have the capability to make unimaginable energies accessible to the people on Earth. This will be accomplished through the people on Earth's diversion and utilization of energies from black holes from within the Milky Way system. However, scientists at this time will still be unable to travel to the center of our galaxy, in order to tap the existing black hole within that region. It will be unnecessary to go to the center of our galaxy, at least at that particular time, for nearby objects will produce sufficient energy to serve Earth's needs. In fact, this new energy source, the energy type itself, will enable the people on Earth to develop new forms of space travel. In the wake and expansion of these developments, a travel and transportation factor becomes reality, which prior to 1995 and long into the future had been called fantasy. Time travel. This discovery invention, in turn, will enable the people on Earth to travel into both the past and the future, and as well into the vastness of this universe, something that was previously impossible. In the aftermath of these events, new groups of people from distant star systems will be encountered, and the people on Earth will learn unfathomable information from these men and women, for these people will possess remarkably greater intelligence than the people on Earth. Developments in every field will progress rapidly, and will result in the creation of artificial, biological people, that will be utilized for the guidance and handling of all apparatuses, devices, electronics and machinery including flying craft and vehicles. By this time, there will be no concern of these biological creatures becoming independent, to later endanger the people on Earth, as it will be the case with the cyborg people, who will no longer be of any use, and will be exterminated without further ado. The time will then come, when all space stations and satellites orbiting Earth, Mars and Venus will crash. This will be the result of the Sun's ever-decreasing activity having changed to such an extent, that monumental gravitational changes of all planets will occur, even to the Sun itself. Scientists will be working at record levels to find solutions for the changes, but they will be unsuccessful. Yet, they will have success inasmuch as they will discover an incredibly important factor in the creational formula. Thereafter, another danger from space will threaten the people on Earth, this time from the depths of the central universe. However, the danger from this threat will become evident only much later. Prior to this event, the people on Earth will place artificial stars into orbit around the Earth, albeit far beyond the customary distance. The people on Earth will not have much luck with these satellites either, for one of the artificial stars will begin to glow due to severe damage, and will scorch large regions of the Earth. In turn, the aftermath of these events will dangerously change the Earth's atmosphere, and will produce an oxygen deficiency that precipitates worldwide riots. From this catastrophe another will evolve, because the scorched land and lack of oxygen cannot remain without consequences either. The catastrophe will drastically affect the economy, and the entire food processing industry, which will result in a famine the likes of which the Earth has never seen, nor experienced over the past thousands of years. This will signify the beginning of the end for conventional space travel, for barely 1 decade later, time travel will become routine through the advancement of technology. Millions of light years will be bridged, that is traversed without any time loss, and the people on Earth will no longer experience limitations in their conquest of distances. This also is the time when geriatric research through genetic reverse manipulations will release the people on Earth from the premature aging, which was brought about long ago within the initial fighting people's genes by the gene manipulators, the creator overlords. This reverse manipulation will afford the people on Earth an even longer lifespan than that achieved by Earth geneticists through prior procedures, whereby the people on Earth's lives increase to an average life expectancy of 400 years. These new achievements will produce an extremely long average life expectancy of approximately 1,000 years. In the ensuing few years, the time will come when intelligent ocean dwellers will begin to contact the people on Earth, and begin to communicate with them, and a new race of inhabitants will thereby be founded. Then the time will come when aggressions with Martian inhabitants will begin, and results in the actual launching of attacks on the colonies. These events will be followed by 15 years of relative calm, finally bringing good fortune to the people on Earth in their quest to find their actual origins. A space expedition by the people on Earth will penetrate into the regions of Sirius, and will discover or rather locate the proof of the earlier ancestry of the people on Earth, who previously were procreated through genetic manipulations in ancient times by the Sirius creator overlords. This discovery will reveal that over many millennia the people on Earth's ancestors fled across long twisting paths, found the Sol system and began settling here. Therefore, the people on Earth will eventually find its direction back to our origin, which of course will not suddenly resolve the people on Earth's problems by any means. Of course, linked to this discovery will also be contacts with very distant ancestors of the previous creator overlords, as well as other people from the Sirius region, that will by then no longer lead to the pursuit and slaughter of the genetically manipulated descendants, the people on Earth. Instead, the contacts will lead to a collaboration resulting in the previous genetic manipulation's definitive reversal. This action, in turn, will result in the birth of new descendants, who will be completely normal and no longer degenerated. The circle then finally closes, and the people on Earth will again have a normal lifespan, and will live in equilibrium with the negative and positive. The reversal of this previous degenerated gene manipulation, along with the continually climbing overpopulation, precipitated even more so by the extraordinary longevity of the people on Earth, will result in plans to remove the genetic damage of those people in whom the genetic reverse manipulation had not yet been performed, on Earth as well as on all other worlds colonized by the people on Earth and space stations inhabited by them. This gene reversal will transpire in the same manner previously proclaimed and demanded by responsible people a very long time ago, and a worldwide halt on the birth rate over a 7-year cycle will be put in place. Within this framework, only parents whose degeneration was previously removed through genetic reverse manipulation will be permitted to procreate. Therefore, only those men and women will be allowed to produce any offspring. Illegal pregnancies will be assessed as a most abhorrent crime, punishable by death to the guilty parties. This concept will only come about as an inescapable law 5 years before the period when complete authority over planet Earth is placed into the hands of the administrative sphere within the Sirius Alliance, and enforced therefrom. Nonetheless, in these distant days ahead, scientists on Earth will be very ambitious, and will fulfill new objectives, make new discoveries, and capture chemistry's last remaining secrets. Despite the incredible knowledge that people of another star system will have passed on to the people on Earth, by far not every mystery about everything will have been penetrated or unraveled. Therefore, research will continue into all facets including that of astronomy, and scientists will subsequently penetrate to the center of the Milky Way, in order to investigate its secrets and those of the supermassive black hole. The Sun's activity will increasingly cause more concern, as it becomes notably weaker and unable to provide sufficient energy to supply Earth and Mars with light and warmth. In these distant, future times, artificial stars will routinely orbit the Earth at a considerable distance, so as to brighten and heat its surface. The situation will not remain benign either, as one can deduce from an event that will occur 70 years after capital punishment for illicit procreation becomes law, when 2 of these artificial stars will destructively collide with one another, inflicting severe damage. These then, are the overall predictions for a succession of future centuries, whereby the sequence of these enumerations has become somewhat intermixed, and only the most significant future events are mentioned here. In addition to these events, many other things will transpire concurrently, that of a political, military, religious, scientific, evolutionary and cosmic nature. There is also a prediction that the Earth's social formats of states still prevalent in 1995 will be abolished and replaced with new programs, whereby the people on Earth no longer must make provisions for their old age through their private finances, because society or rather the federal state will pay for it. A very inexpensive energy source will increase food supply production, to the point where food can be distributed without charge. More of this incredibly inexpensive energy will be generated than the people on Earth can utilize. Therefore, the cost of living will drop to nearly zero. Pension plans, for example, along with other financial support systems will become redundant, if for no other reason than the fact that virtually no income will be required any longer for a man or woman's livelihood. At this point, money will completely lose its value for these very same purposes, except for the fulfillment of personal pleasures, for recreational and pastime activities, etc. Nevertheless, such actions will not produce solutions to every monetary problem to the point where money will be totally eliminated as legal tender once and for all. The people on Earth will continue to be caught up with their thoughts of using money in the near and more distant future, and many hundreds of years will be marked by its use, although 2 attempts to completely eliminate money will be initiated. However, these endeavors are doomed, because the people on Earth simply do not wish to detach themselves in the near future from money and wealth. For this reason, all related efforts will be undermined, because gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and other valuable metals, precious stones, jewelry and other items sold illicitly, will ultimately lead to the collapse of the attempts to abolish money. Money may eventually be prohibited by law in the distant future, and such a development is just as predestined to occur as the one in the near future when the breeding of animals will be abolished. Geneticists will eventually discover a method that enables plants to produce the animal proteins required for proper nutrition. Scientists will finally realize that this process is actually feasible through genetic manipulation. This realization is to be expected very soon, although its enactment will not occur until much later. Blame for this delay may be placed on the anti-genetic manipulation gripers, who insanely and incomprehensibly are against gene technology and gene manipulations. Therefore, the anti-gripers' efforts must be blamed for the burden upon life caused by the long-time mass breeding, mass transport and mass torture of countless animals. The solutions brought about by vegetable animal protein production and a perfectly acceptable meat substitute could have been effected long before through gene technology, to be marketed as food supplies, were it not for the decades of insane anti-griping efforts that impede these actions. The blame for the suffering of many billions of animals must be directed towards these idiotic gripers, until they are ultimately forced into silence and kept quiet. Only then will the horrors of mass animal breeding and all other related torture of animals find an end. The predictions also fail to mention that scientists will soon realize the Earth's atmosphere is truly not conducive to prolonging health and longevity. Although mention is made in the predictions of a genetically manipulated descendant's adaptation to the Earth's atmosphere, no information is given about scientists discovering the Earth's atmosphere being unsuitable for the people on Earth, and the fact that it contributes greatly to their rapid aging process. Furthermore, no mention is made about scientific discoveries which will supposedly lead to the imminent production of air that is healthier and more beneficial to the people on Earth than before. This air will be a different and more suitable composition, which will be available for purchase both in bottles for private consumption and as little life extenders. Currently, the oxygen-nitrogen proportion of the Earth's air is not only unsuitable, but its oxygen content is much too low, and it also contains a variety of dangerous gases inhaled by the people on Earth. Regarding the Earth itself, a fact not mentioned in the predictions, is that all along the scientists were unaware that this planet was not expanding over the millennia through the accumulation of falling star dust and meteors, etc., but that imperceptibly, it has been expanding internally. This means that an imperceptible expansion process has been ongoing for millennia, whereby, slowly the Earth's internal riches are transported to the surface. Over time, this expansion process will accelerate in correlation with the Sun's decreasing nuclear fusion rate, through which all gravity fields within the entire Solar System will change, in particular, those of all the planets. In the predictions made so far, mention was made about the discovery of time travel by the people on Earth, and how to break into future and past dimensions. However, no mention was made about the discovery and locations of other dimensions, and the revelation of untold opportunities for the people on Earth. Yet, once again many dangers will be linked to their discoveries, and some will be of a physical nature, while others will be the result of encounters with advanced people of other star systems. To this end, renewed conflicts will erupt, and many events will become a reality that previously were considered science fiction fantasies. Many more power struggles and revolts will take place on Earth, even at times when governments no longer reside on this planet, but will orbit in space stations surrounding it. These governments will not find a safe haven there for long, as some predictions mentioned the rulers will be overthrown up there. Through faults and machinations of scientists, an ignorant time will follow once again, whereupon the people on Earth will utilize the services of an animal that harbors much negativity, viciousness and degeneration. This condition will be revealed to the people on Earth, and will be provoked by the scientists' service agreement. Consequently, the animals will begin to attack people to a point where it or they will actually hunt the people on Earth, and masses of people will be slaughtered. The prediction, unfortunately, does not divulge any information on whether the animals will be introduced to Earth from the vastness of this universe, or whether it will originate on the Earth itself. In any case, the people on Earth throughout the world will be forced to defend themselves against these animals. But their efforts will be futile, and for this reason, everyone on Earth will have little choice than to flee to one continent, which will be forged into a gigantic fortress. 300 years later, scientists will once again create a horrendous calamity, for their conceit and arrogance will push them to the point where they see themselves as gods, and in their megalomania they will perceive themselves as equals to creation, and as being irreplaceable in every way. Nearly 100 years later, a very vicious and aggressive act may take place on Earth's neighbor planet Mars, when numerous spaceships attack and completely annihilate the planet, until even its substance is eliminated. During this period, the destroyer planet will once again create havoc. This ancient roaming celestial body will enter the inner Sol system on a collision course with Earth, as a result of the Sun's rapidly dwindling nuclear activity, and the subsequent total alteration of the gravity fields within the entire Sol system. The destroyer previously caused repeated destruction in the old Lyra regions over millions of years. Only sparsely populated at that time, the Earth will be faced with the threat of complete annihilation resulting from this destructive wanderer, and the people on Earth will be incapable of safeguarding themselves against it. Because of the suddenly depleted gravity fields now completely out of control throughout the entire Sol system, the people on Earth will be unable to direct the destroyer into another orbit or annihilate it. Neither alternative will benefit the Earth, for by this time it will be uninhabitable, due to the monumental changes occurring within the Sun. As a consequence, the remaining few million people on Earth will flee, departing from the planet in hopes of finding an alternative planet elsewhere and of settling there. They may get help from the descendants of former inhabitants of Earth from the Sirius regions. Everything will transpire as it must. After the disastrous blunders by scientists on Earth, the people on Earth will suffer from the scientists' attempts to annihilate the destroyer, and the scientists' arrogance and conceit will plummet. The people on Earth will congregate around them, and begin to flee from the threatened planet Earth. Nearly 3 years later, the destroyer will enter the former orbit of Mars, and ram into the two Martian moons, Phobos and Deimos, which had remained intact during the planet's destruction. The two moons will disintegrate and trail behind the huge roaming planet, as it continues to race toward Earth and ultimately reaches it, but does not ram into it. Nonetheless, the near collision will result in a catastrophic event, in which the destroyer smashes into the Earth's moon. This will cause both the moon and the destroyer to shatter into a myriad of pieces, which will form a rotating belt orbiting around the Earth. The oceans, lakes and rivers will also be torn from their beds at this time, and will evaporate into the atmosphere from the ensuing immense heat. The steam, along with gigantic portions of the atmosphere, will be wrenched into space and dissipate, while at the same time, the Earth's imperceptible expansion process over the past thousands of years becomes evident now. The Earth will heat up from its interior, and the planet's surface will ultimately become uninhabitable. Meanwhile, Mercury will enter a collision course with the Sun, and will plunge into it, producing a catastrophe that signifies the destruction of the final remaining people within the Sol system. For nearly 100 years afterward, the Sun will generate gigantic eruptions and nuclear fusions once again, as well as protuberances that will extend far into space. By this time the planetary orbits will be destroyed to a point where they will no longer circle around the Sun. No longer will it radiate, nor will it become a supernova. After all of this transpires, the Sun will glow and glimmer weakly, and generate occasional gaseous explosions, along with nuclear fusion activity. Even these conditions will increasingly diminish as time goes on, and eventually all activity will cease completely, whereupon the Sun will drift through space as a dead dark star, surrounded by equally dead planets. The end will come when the dead Sun, along with the accompanying satellites that drift around it, are attracted and sucked into a black hole. Together they will condense with incredible force and stagnate there, until they and other material within the black hole are ejected in one massive explosion. This event will generate fresh gases, fine particles and other elements, that will develop into new galaxies, stars, planets, moons and other forms. These developments will cover many billions of years. According to calculations, roughly 10 billion years will pass before the Sun and its planets die, exist while dead, and then are swallowed and annihilated by the aforementioned black hole. The predictions also provide important insight into women's future role alongside men. In the more distant future, women will fully regain their former original equal status and rights in the men's world, in regards to their complete duties, assignments and tasks. A joint man and woman relationship will come to exist, as it has in earliest times, when men and women stood shoulder to shoulder with total equality of rights as they function and work together. As it was in early times, so will it be again in the distant future, that women with children shall first and foremost dedicate themselves to their offspring, by grooming and educating them among other things, and will maintain the household. Just as they have done since ancient times, men will attend to and exert themselves for those matters and concerns which were designated to them throughout antiquity, due to their physique, etc. Therefore, the modern proliferation by the women's liberation movements, and the single-handed push by women into upper management and responsible positions for their sole supremacy, to mention a few things, will be eliminated once and for all, in order to make room for equality and equal rights that will hold true for both men and women. As a result, men and women will work together jointly on all tasks, and will deal with them equally. Neither one man nor one woman will elevate him or herself above the other in rank or power, regarding business, administration, government, power and other situations, as is the case today. It is very important to realize, too, that many negative events will occur in the near future, regarding diseases and epidemics on Earth. For this reason, all people must become very meticulous about their hygiene, and must avoid physical contact with people of questionable health status. There should be paid great attention to all diseases and infections, because in future times, these can turn into much graver and even incurable illnesses. The same will hold true also for physical contact with animals, including touching of any type. An additional concern will be the intake of animal origin food products, absorption of viruses, bacteria, etc., of animal substances such as feces, saliva, blood, hair and so forth, which can also cause fatal diseases and epidemics. For this reason alone, animals of every type should not be kept within the confines of people's homes, indeed, they should not be tolerated within even briefly. The following facts explain the ancestry of the Plowyaran, and the Old Lyrians. The Plowyaran, as distant descendants of the ancient Lyrians, maintain contact neither with the Sirius people, nor with today's descendants of the former creator overlords, regardless of whether they possess positive or negative characteristics. They have no plans for such contacts, not now nor in the near future. However, their divergent paths will eventually come full circle, and one day they will join again, taking place at the earliest, when the genetic manipulations are reversed. Only then will the descendants of the former creator overlords be sufficiently advanced in their evolution, to allow for any contact between the Plowyaran and themselves. The same also holds true for people of the Sirius region, who are completely different lineages of people outside the Enoch lineage. Indeed, they have no hereditary link whatsoever with the descendants of the former creator overlords. Today's Plowyaran and Illyrians, along with the current people of the Enoch-Nocodemian lineage, who reside in the Doll universe, are all part of the lineage of people that are exceedingly elevated in their consciousness, spirituality and technical developments. They are no longer capable of contacting lesser evolved people, such as the people on Earth, inhabitants of the Sirius regions and many other lineages of other star systems, without endangerment through the lower vibrations from these people, who are less evolved. Furthermore, Plowyaran laws prohibit them from contacting these less evolved people, and interfering in their private affairs. Such actions would dangerously intrude upon the self-determined evolution of these less evolved people. As it is the case with any other man or woman, everyone must evolve through their own strength. Higher evolved people are permitted to extend to the less evolved people certain realizations and prospects only through impulses, which on one hand, cannot be recognized as such, and on the other, do not lead to opportunities that would accord greater and more extensive realizations and prospects than those sustained by lower evolutionary levels. Based upon this justification, the Plowyaran have elected to contact neither the descendants of the past creator overlords within the Sirius regions and other locations, nor the actual Sirius people themselves. When the old Lyrians ventured to Earth ages ago, and commenced their activities among the people on Earth, whose actual origins were elsewhere, as explained earlier several times, they selected periods when neither the positive nor negative creator overlords or their distant descendants were present in the Sol system or on Earth, respectively, after the creator overlords had again vacated this region. The old Lyrians, and later the Plejaren, were always vigilant, for they had no desire to encounter the creator overlords or their descendants. They did not want a confrontation, since they wished to travel their own path, but additionally, they did not want to be driven into combat with the other Enoch lineage, due to their different beliefs and opinions. This discrepancy eventually had led the creator overlords to breed the genetically manipulated people, an act of which both the old Lyrians and their descendants, the Plejaren, strongly disapproved. From this time onward, they refrained from having any contact with Enoch lineage inhabitants from the Sirius regions, as well as with those actual Sirius people, who were no better than the inhabitants of other locations. The old Lyrians in the meantime had progressed in their evolution beyond that of the inhabitants from the Sirius regions, the other Enoch lineage and the actual Sirius people. And for this reason, any contacts with these groups were out of the question, since they would have been far too dangerous for their bodies, indeed, their lives. Although the old Lyrians remained relatively aggressive, scheming and so forth, they were not deprived of simultaneous conscious and spiritual evolution, except for those people who forcibly refused to adapt to the evolutionary process. These groups were forced to leave the Lyra Vega regions and others, and they ventured into the Sol system. Among them were some benevolent and evolved people, who took upon themselves the sacrifice of leaving along with the refugees, so they could continue their teaching mission of directing the refugees onto the path of peace and love. In the course of time they succeeded in reaching their goals, however, many things repeatedly went awry. These old Lyrians intermingled with the people on Earth, just as the creator overlord's descendants from the Sirius regions had done previously. Therefore, the descendants of the old Lyrians vegans were also confronted with and subjected to the genetic manipulation in the same manner as everyone on Earth. Their interactions took place in a relatively brief period, since approximately 3,000 years later, not a single man or woman could be found on Earth who was not affected by the genetic manipulation through heredity. This applied to the 144,210 leaders, sub-leaders, and the very positive spiritual leaders, who had voluntarily embraced the idea of instructing the refugees in the spiritual teachings and in other matters along with several millions of ordinary people. For this reason, it is likely since that time, not a single man or woman on Earth has existed who does not harbor the legacy of negative and positive degeneration, although it would manifest itself according to the man or woman's balance, because degenerations can occur frequently in forms of both negativity and positiveness. Although the old Lyrians had greatly evolved by this time, they lacked knowledge regarding the laws of creation, often ignoring them completely, and therefore, wreaked much havoc. However, this was applicable only to those few million people who had fled in earlier times from their home worlds. On Earth they behaved in much the same manner, and consequently, they adopted religions established by the descendants of the creator overlords. They elevated themselves to creator gods, so as to control the people on Earth. Therefore, the old Lyrians were neither the true initiators nor the founders of the religions, with their god creators and creator gods. Instead, they were merely the unscrupulous exploiters of the equally unscrupulous creator overlords' descendants who initiated religious legends, religious fables, god fables, origin of the world fables, and other illogical concepts. And in doing so, on one hand, they wanted to conceal and allow the true origin of the people on Mars, Bellona and Earth to sink into obscurity, so they would not find their way back to the Sirius regions one day, and on the other hand, they anticipated that their initiated religions would create conflicts and wars among the genetically manipulated people, who would subsequently exterminate themselves. Therefore, they hoped that the Sol system inhabitants would never rise again, nor would they embark upon a return trip to their homeland. The old Lyrians vegans gradually began changing their outlook, and started to follow the spiritual teachings. The laws of creation, and their overall evolution began to advance rapidly, and they greatly elevated themselves spiritually and technologically. Consequently, they had to guard themselves even more, and did not allow any type of contact at all to occur between them and the descendants of the creator overlords, or with the people from the Sirius region. After making peace with the inhabitants of their home planets, one old Lyrian vegan group returned there, while a second group withdrew to another dimension beyond the Pleiades constellation. Therefore, this group withdrew from our dimension, just as the old Lyrians vegans did previously, and these people found a new homeland beyond the Hyades star cluster, about 150 light-years from Earth. A third group left our universe, the Dern universe, and penetrated into its twin universe, which is called the doll universe, where they propagated and formed a gigantic federation together with many other advanced lineages of people. The same situation occurred also with the Plejaren, whose federation exists in a region approximately 7 billion light-years in diameter, and in a space-time configuration that deviates by a fraction of a second from our own. However, some of the Federation members, or rather Federation planets, still exist in our space and time configuration,